It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Caramel Lucas. Hey, Caramel, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh, doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I mean, I was looking forward to it, so I was excited for today.
Oh, well, good. Well, we were excited, too, to have you on. I'm looking over your bio. You've been busy, really busy, yeah?
Yeah, you know, I can't sit still. I don't know what's wrong with me. I mean, every time you turn around, I got to be doing something, So, yeah, I'm just want to keep going.
So you've got a podcast called Keepin It Real. How long have you been doing the podcast?
Well, I have been doing the podcast ever since the end of June of 2020, when the pandemic started, probably 3 months after that. Because, when the pandemic came, a lot of people let people off their jobs and stuff like that. And so I was one of the people that was let go from my previous job, corporate world, and I decided to do my podcast, and so far it's going great. Yeah,
the pandemic has kind of hurt a lot of people, particularly in this business, in the entertainment business. It's really hurt with actors and...
No, yeah, it has. It hurt a lot of people, and that's when I definitely found because I was doing stand-up comedy as well. So when that had to stop, you can't get on stage, and so I had to find another way for me to talk to people, and the podcast was the best way for me to do it.
Yeah, you know what? I've never heard podcasting referenced with stand-up comedy. It seems like it's a one-way street with a podcast. Where stand-up, you get that immediate audience feedback, which you don't necessarily get with a podcast, yeah? You miss that?
Well, me, I love, right. I love, with stand-up, you get that immediate contact, that immediate response. But at the end of the day, podcasting to me my podcast is probably different from any podcast. I don't know. But I do know that when I talk to people, I want them to be able to be themselves. As they say, let down your hair, loosen your tie, and let's have fun with it. And let's talk about what you got going on. And then let's talk about, fun things. Let's laugh a little bit because, I need that laughter because, I'm a stand-up comic. So I need, to bring some fun into the situation. And so, I get feedback from that and just talk to people and interact. And that's what I love to do.
So your podcast is a sort of like a call-in show?
My podcast is a call-in show. I'm with Anchor, and what Anchor does is it's a platform that they can call into and come directly to me. And what we do is we talk about all kinds of things. I interview any entrepreneur that's trying to, be heard or want to be heard. And so it doesn't matter if you're an author or artist or musician, if you are a yoga instructor. I don't care if you're CEO of a business. It doesn't matter. I will talk to you, and we'll let everybody know what's going on with you. That's what I do.
When you were doing stand-up comedy before the pandemic hit, were you having any issues with cancel culture? Because I've spoken with a lot of stand-up comics who are having a real tough time, particularly on college campuses, where people seem to be offended by everything they said. And they just gave up. They said, you know what, I'm not doing colleges anymore. They found that the environment was too toxic. And did you run into any of that?
Well, actually, I didn't do any college because when I was talking to people, they were telling me that college's campus is too much for them and they don't want to do it. So I decided just to focus on doing other things, as I do comedy clubs and bars and stuff like that, because I feel like you can be more free in doing that. You can say whatever you want to say and get away with a lot of things that you can't say on, college campuses and stuff like that. Because I do both. I do adult and clean comedy, but I started off doing adult comedy.
So when you say adult comedy, you mean it's sex comedy, or it has?
Well, when I when I say adult comedy, I'm talking about like a Rich Pryor kind of thing, Red Fox kind of comedy, and to be a female, that's what kind of comedy I was doing in the beginning, and then I decided that I want to be a little bit more commercial bound, and so I started saying, let me just clean up, the Richard Pryor kind of thing, because I love Richard Pryor. I think that he's a great comic.
Amazing. And, I'm definitely a Richard Pryor fan.
Exactly, and so I was like, let me clean up a little bit. I'm a female. Everybody probably looking at me like, wow, I didn't know all that could come out her mouth. So, because they was like, oh my God, I can't believe she said that. Like, yeah, I said it, but so I had to try to refocus and just try to make it sound a little bit better, because people couldn't believe that I was coming out with these words,
I think there is kind of a double standard with stand-up comedians and with men and women. I think, like you said, I think men can get away with saying a lot more dirty stuff. Lisa Lampanelli, who is one I like, she kind of broke that mold too, with the gender stereotypes in stand-up.
Yeah, she did, and that's what I don't understand. I believe it's a double standard as well, because I feel like a man can say whatever they want to say, and everybody like, woo, woo, all excited. But when a woman say it, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe she said that. Like, and I'm like, we saying basically the same thing, but I'm a female and that's a male. Like, what's the difference, But that's how people look at it, and so I was like, it's harder for a woman in comedian world than a man. We have to keep pushing to be a part of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that stand-up comedy, and then even if you go way back, I mean, Joan Rivers was one of the first female stand-ups way back in the 60s, and she was the only one for a long time.
Yeah, but she had to go through so much, and she had to prove herself every time she got on stage. She had to be better than the next person. And every man, she had to be better than that. And I don't understand why we have to work so hard, because I feel like, it's the same thing, but it's just a different gender. But it's crazy to me. But yeah, we have to work double time harder when we on stage, because they're like definitely looking at us, like making sure that we won't make a mistake or what we're going to say and stuff like that. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, there is definitely a double standard in that. Let's move on to your book. You've also got a book out called In Love with the Other Man.
Yes, I do. I wrote the book in 2013, and when I wrote the book, it's basically about it's an erotic book, romance, and it's basically about a female, four friends that are really close and they support each other 100%. But one of the ladies in the book is Liz, and she is married to a man who cheats on her. And so she's looking for love. She's been with him through thick and thin, and she finally found out, like, it's time for her to move on with her life and stop, waiting for him to become a better man, basically. And
on your sheet here, it says, now made into a feature film.
Yeah, and I decided to take that book because like I told you, Douglas, I can't sit down, I can't stay still, right? So I always want to create something new, and so I decided to make a feature film out of it. And I wrote it, I directed, I produced it, and it's called In Love with the Other Man. And the same thing as the book, it whatever has more little details into the movie than the book, but it's basically about the book.
You made the whole film yourself?
Yeah, I did everything by myself. The filming part, I had to have some help, but other than that, everything else, the way I directed it, where I produced it, where I written it, and all that, I did it. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty remarkable. I mean, people go to school for a long time to learn how to do stuff like that. Wow, good for you.
I told you my mind my mind it goes like I cannot, like I be thinking like I can believe I can do this, and it, your first time of doing something, it either is going to work or not, right? So why not step out and try and see what happens? I didn't submit it to any kind of film festivals or anything like that. I just wanted the accomplishment of saying that I did a movie, and I put it on YouTube. And I did that because I was like, I want to do something different. I just want to make this book out so people can see the real people that was into the book. I was going to submit it to film festivals, but I decided not to. I was like, I don't want to. I just want to have that sensational feeling like I did that. This is what I wrote, and this is what I did.
Well, is the film available for people to watch?
Yeah, on YouTube. If you go on YouTube, you can look at Under In Love with the Other Man and Under Cameron Lucas, and it's right there, right on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I want to check it out. This sounds interesting.
And I'm warning everybody, 18 and up. 18 and up, because it's very sexual.
Oh, well, I'm well over 18, so no worries about that. It's been, how long has it been? I don't even want to say how long it's been since I was 18.
Yeah, it's very sexual, erotic, and it's like have a lot of romance into it, so there you go.
So you didn't get kicked off of YouTube, though, right? Because sometimes if you show too much, they cancel your video.
No, actually, I put it as in, you have, when you go and look at the YouTube, you actually have to put like your age. So because I did put it's not for kids, and so they know it's sexual. So like it's not that sexual. It's not showing parts like that, but it's a little bit romantic. It's like a Lifetime thing. It's just like a Lifetime.
Oh, okay.
It's like a Lifetime base. But it is not for kids to see that's under 18.
Okay. Yeah, YouTube gets really fussy if, like you said, if parts start showing.
Right, exactly. Yeah. They're like, oh, no, we can't play
can't
this.
Do that.
No, I know, right? No parts are showing. It's just like you can see, being an adult, you already know what they're, but I don't want kids to see that.
Well, it's funny. Speaking of sex, and I just tell you one quick story about YouTube. I had a guest on. He's a fairly famous film producer and film screenwriter, and his name is Jim Cummings, and it's spelled Cummings. That's just the guy's last name, right? So I put up the interview on YouTube. Douglas Coleman show featuring Jim Cummings with his new film, blah blah blah, and it got banned. And I said, what happened? I said, what happened? So I had to go. I don't know if you've ever tried to go through customer service at YouTube, but let me tell you, that's a whole nother job to get through to an actual person, And finally, I got through to a person, and they said that their algorithms blocked it because of the word Cummings, because it was spelled with a U, and... I said, look, that's just the guy's name. What do you want me to ask him to change his name? And so they put the interview back up. But it took like 2 weeks to go through that just because of that word. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Yeah, that is funny because it's like they're like, oh, Cummins. Oh, no, we can't put that on YouTube. Oh, that's crazy.
So what else you want to mention? We're kind of running down on time. You got anything else you want to promote or talk about before we wrap it up?
Well, I'm also a poet. I write poetry as well and creative writing. So my poetry, I became one of the best poets of 2019, 2020.
Great.
And I received plaques for that, and I love writing poetry because that's the romance side of me, besides the funny side and the nasty side. Okay, so and I do write creative writing. I like talk about like real life situations. I'm on Substacks on that. You can go to Substacks and find Cameron Lucas, and you can go to Poet Nation and read my poetry under Cameron Lucas as well. And I I did a little bit of acting and some modeling, and I've been modeling since 2000, and I can't say that way back in 2000. I'm not gonna tell you my age, but yeah. So yeah, basically I just love being creative and doing a lot of great things.
Okay, what did you say your website was? Do you have a website where people can check out all these stuff?
Yeah, it's www.caramellucas.net.
Okay. And that's spelled Caramel, right? Lucas?
Right, CARAMELLUCAS.net.
Great. Well, I guess one last question is, what's left for you to do? It seems like you've done it all already.
I know, right, Douglas? I don't know, because my mind runs, and before you know it, I'm gonna made up a new thing. But I did make up a fragrance. I made my own fragrance, and It's on my website. So if anybody want to buy my fragrance, please do. It's on my website. It's called Taste of Caramel, and it's really sweet. It smells really good, so you should get a bottle. And I did that, and I don't know what else is in store for me. I have so many ideas. So if I find out an idea, I'm gonna do it. So I can't sit down.
I just want, before we go, I'm curious. I want to ask you about that. How does one make a fragrance? What do? Do you have test tubes and chemicals in a lab that you're mixing up and smelling, or did somebody else do that part for you?
Well, I know, right? So what I did was I went and found this company and over Paris, and I told them I wanted to make a fragrance, and they was like, "You want to make a fragrance?" So I was like, "Yeah, why not? I do everything else." So he was like, "What's the scents that you want? The oil scents that you want?" So I pick out my oil scents. And then once I pick up my oil scents, he put them all together, and then he sent me a sample of it, and I smelled it, and I was like, perfect, that's the perfect smell for me. And then what they did was they made the oils, made the fragrance, and sent me a whole package of what the bottle, how my bottles was, and the fragrance that I got, and it smells really, really good.
Yeah, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I did that. No, nobody knew that you can do it, but I found a way to do it, So you can't get away from me, because I'm going to find a way to do things.
It doesn't sound like it, yeah. All right, well, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing with us. It was nice meeting you. Nice talking to you. And best of luck.
You too.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on The Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. Heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hi, this is John Morgan, Production Supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to The Douglas Coleman Show, Heather Gooden. Hello, Heather. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. So you are an author, and you're from Manitoba, as you just told me?
Yeah, I'm from a small town in Manitoba, and I work full-time, and I have a little passion project involving writing on the side.
Okay. Well, I'm looking through your website here. You've written a lot of books. That seems like almost a full-time job. How long did it take you to write all these books?
Well, so the biggest issue I would say that I have is finding enough time for all of the ideas in my head. So I do not run short on those. But, the books that I have out, I guess I would say I started writing again after a hiatus for education, probably 2015. And my first book I wrote in November with NaNoWriMo. And that kind of opened the door to all of the other stories. So the first book took probably over a month for the first draft. And then I would say the quickest I've written a full-length novel is probably about 3 or 4 weeks. And the longest is probably 3 to 6 months, somewhere in that range.
Well, I'm looking at these here. You've got The Rise of Light Trilogy, Book 1, Book 2, Book 3.
So those were the Dream of Darkness, Book 1 in that trilogy would be the first novel that I wrote. And it was meant to be a one-off, but of course, by the time I got to the end of it, I was like, well, I'm not done with the story. I need to find out what they do next. And then it became a trilogy, and then wasn't quite ready to say goodbye to my main characters. So then they each got their own spin-off book. And I have, it's rather embarrassing, but I have about 6 full-length first draft novels that I have to get around to editing yet. So that's just the ones that I've finished.
Is there one particular genre that all these fall into, or are they kind of multiple genres?
You know, I would say that they all probably have a little bit of magical realism in common. So you could put them under the fantasy umbrella, but they're not necessarily all in the exact same subgenre. And the most recent book that I've released is actually nonfiction, so it's a departure from the other ones, but it is something that I have been also working on throughout the last 5 or 6 years. And in fact, initially when I did start writing again, it was nonfiction.
Okay. I see the word witch on quite a number of these books.
Yeah.
What is a witch exactly? I mean, there's the stereotypical witch, the Halloween witch, but there's other witches.
Yeah, so the first one that you're probably looking at would be The Phoenix and the Witch, which is book 3 in the original Rise of the Light trilogy. And she is actually not at all what most people would consider a witch. In fact, she goes back to some of the earliest Irish folk tales and legends involving, what a lot of people would call the she or the fair folk. And she's the original bad guy that the Irish fair folk defeated before becoming sort of the ruling magical class there.
Well, when I think of witches, I always go back to my childhood and think of the show Bewitched, which had a lot of interesting social comments, about the stereotype of the ugly witch, and they took great offense to that because she was beautiful. And, they were making more comments about the time, the late 60s. That isn't typically what a witch is it? The tall hat and the crooked nose and all of that? Where did that come from? Where did that particular picture of a witch come from? Do you know?
So I actually think that the traditional stereotypical Halloween witch that you're describing, the way I look at it is I think that actually comes more from the period of the 14 and 1500s in Europe. Because if you look at what an older woman looks like, or what they would consider like a wise woman, often a woman that had some medical knowledge, maybe did the local deliveries, where they were a midwife, a herbalist kind of picture. They were often very respected, but also feared, because these women had power and no one controlled them. So I think what we think of as that stereotypical witch is a woman who has knowledge and no one controls them. And it became this, scary witch that eats kids.
Well, that's interesting.
Because while powerful, they were also simultaneously quite vulnerable.
Well, then you had the Salem witch trials in the 1600s, which was taking it to another level. Now, they seemed to think that these women needed to be burned at the stake because of whatever powers they thought they possessed.
Yeah. And again, I think that comes back down more to
the
society
fear.
dynamics. Yeah. And I mean, it's really, I've read all kinds of different scenarios about that, involving everything from ergot making people crazy to a mini ice age, making the food supply really scarce and minimal, and people basically panicking and turning on these suspicious old women that maybe weren't the nicest people to them, or, you know, might have been seen as an outsider. And in times where people are struggling, a scapegoat is a very classic human, I don't know if it's a need or just something people turn to as an easy alternative to being afraid about something they can't control.
Well, that's true. And I think throughout history, we as a human race have always had somebody to scapegoat.
I mean, we're herd ants.
Yeah.
You know? So if you're not part of the herd, well, then maybe you're a threat to the herd. I would say that it is also a wonderful way to keep people under control and towing that society line. And it's interesting because themes like that actually do show up in a lot of the books that I write.
The picture that was sent to me was a book called Passages, Death, Dementia, and Everything in Between. Is that the book you're promoting now?
Yeah, so that actually just released on Tuesday. So it's brand new. And that is my nonfiction. I would classify that one more as a narrative medicine book. And that is my full-time job. And in the last 10 years, it's a big portion of what I've seen and thought and experienced.
Okay. What is your full-time job?
I am a family physician who has, over the last 10 years, I would say more than half of my ongoing full-time work has been revolving around care of elderly and long-term care and palliation for our patients.
I've had other people on the show and we've discussed dementia, and it's something that's very tragic. The one issue that seemed to come up over and over again was the most difficult challenge for people caring for somebody with dementia is initially trying to convince them that they have dementia. Would you find that to be true?
You know, I would say that is a big part of it, but it presents a little differently for the people that I've seen. Sometimes the patient is aware there's something wrong before the rest of the family. Sometimes the patient and the primary caregiver are quite aware that, you know, their mind is not doing things the way it used to or the way they wish it was, but other family members are in denial. And sometimes we see people admitted to hospital because no one recognized it. So I see it present in a variety of ways, but I don't think it's ever an easy transition regardless of how it presents.
Is there any treatment for dementia? Anything that can be done?
I mean, there's so many different kinds of dementia. It's almost the same as asking, is there any treatment for cancer? Because there are some treatments that can be effective in some cases at either slowing progression or, you know, if, for example, there's certain kinds of dementia they think might be associated with increased intracranial pressure. In that case, putting in a shunt could completely fix somebody's symptoms. But that's not going to be the most common kind that we see. And as of right now, there really isn't one magic bullet effective treatment that would ever return someone to their previous self. There's some that slow things down, we think, some that probably ineffective for most people. And overall, we right now think of dementia as an end-stage illness in the same way that many cancers are.
Well, that's true. Although dementia, I have never heard of anybody who was in their 20s or 30s getting dementia. Does that happen? Because
no.
Certainly people in their 20s and 30s have had cancer.
Right. So when I say that dementia is an end-stage illness, I don't necessarily imply any specific age with it, but a diagnosis of dementia is considered an end-stage illness. There's no treatment, and it will always progress.
Right.
So I've never seen anybody in their 20s or 30s with dementia. However, we do know that people that have certain either brain injuries or they were born with brains that were maybe not, entirely functional for whatever reason, will often develop dementia at much younger ages. So we do know that people can have dementia in their 30s and 40s. It's just not the most common scenario. And there is dementias like Huntington's, chorea, which definitely can show up in people in their 20s. And that's awful because Huntington's is one of those disorders that is inherited in the family I believe it's autosomal dominant, which means if you get the gene, you have the Huntington. But you can also get repeats, so it doesn't follow the strict genetic like one copy. It can multiply. So if you get one copy, then you might have onset later in life and not even know you have the gene until you have children, which is horrible for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then in other cases, get like 1,000 copies of that gene, and you might have the dementia onset at age 21.
So is this book just sort of like a diary chronicle of the people that you've met, that you've worked with?
It's kind of a little bit of everything in the sense that it's a collection of poetry and some short pieces and some more introspective thoughts about my life as it relates to the work I do and the people that I meet. So it bounces all over the place. There's some stories in there about my childhood and harvest and spending time with my grandparents when I was a child, and then contrasting that to my life as a mother and watching my parents now be the grandparents. So there's a lot of different overlays, but if I could describe it as anything, I would say that it is a collection of stories where I'm trying to make sense of the entire process of life and find a sense of meaning in this when people forget who they are.
Well, that's a big job.
And I will leave it up to the reader to determine how much success I have there. But the actual process I found very cathartic during a time of my life that I was really struggling with, because here I was working full time. I had 3 babies in 3 years, and I went back to work when my third was a week old because I had to go and write some death certificates out, and no one would cover my patients because there wasn't anyone who was available. So I was working more than I wanted to for the simple reason that I felt these people needed me even more in some ways than my own children, because my husband was able to stay home, but there was no one for these people, no one that could really help make the rest of their life as comfortable and happy as possible.
We do have to wrap this up, unfortunately. We are out of time. Can you give out your website, please, so people can check out your books?
Yeah, certainly. Type it in Google or whatever search engine, and everything that I write is easy to find under H.M. Gooden Author. So website, hmgoodenauthor.com, and then Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, etc., all under H.M. Gooden Author.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing and telling us about your books. And best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.